Oh, yes, you can sign up on the sign up sheet. And our question of the month this month is your favorite Star Wars character. And I suggested Voldemort, but apparently that's not right. But it could be. Imagine if those two got together. Yeah, somebody will write a fan fiction about that now. Tanya, it's your assignment for next week. We have two great featured readers tonight, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But to start with, I'd like to read a poem. I just got back from a trip to Japan and was privileged to visit the birthplace of Basho, the famous haiku poet, and many other places in Japan, some haiku related. And this is a poem by Peggy Heinrich called Conversation with Basho. A tiny dot in front of the horizon grows larger, becomes a Japanese brush stroke, becomes a four-pointed star. It is Basho. Across his shoulders rests a bamboo pole, a straw basket on each end. Near his hut he sets down his load, crouches, stares at the dust in the road. I watch him as if at the edge of a painting. I step through the frame and speak. I feel you have many answers. Sit or stand, but be still. My face flushes and I remain silent. Can you help me with these baskets? I nod and move towards the baskets. They contain water. How do these baskets, with their holes and cracks, hold water? The earth, full of holes and cracks, holds water. Basho places his palms on the sides of the basket. The reflection of the moon ripples on the water. There's the world, water, dark sky, moon, in a basket. Tomorrow, the sun will be in the basket. He slides his fingers into the water, shattering the moon and the sky like glass. See what a human hand can do to the world? Basho sits on the ground, untying a sack. He motions for me to sit. I am silent, watching. Finally, I speak. You live simply. You write and teach. The world praises you. Praise is the shiny fish that sparkles in water uncaught. Once out of the water, it is dull. Only if you like to fish. Keep fishing. I know these things. If you are wise, why do you seek me out? You remind me of the way things are. I ask Basho to teach me the art of haiku. Take 3 sticks. Cut one, then another. Your eye will tell you when they are in balance. Sometimes you will end with 3 slivers that fall in the dust to the ground. Haiku is the poetry of 3 sticks. He pauses. The peony blossom is trying to tell you something. Study it. Watch it unfold. The 100 white petals of the peony surround the secret. The unclenching fist reveals an open palm. Basho beckons me into his hut and prepares tea. The straw mat creaks, knees bow low. The sound of sipping. Here, everything is calm. He waves a tablet of paper like a fan. I write, I pray, I live on fish caught up with a kite string. I sleep, it is enough. You have no other needs? I like being alone. That is a conversation with Basho by Peggy Heinrich. Tonight, our first featured reader is Shinyi Pai. She is the author of 8 books of poetry, including the most recent Ozarks. Her work, Her work has appeared in publications throughout the United States, Japan, China, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, and Canada. And it includes some renga and haiku, and I think, do you have haiku with not bombs? You have that here? Oh, okay. All right. She has been a featured presenter at the Montreal Zen Poetry Festival and the Geraldine Dodge Poetry Festival. Xinyi has served as a poet in residence for the Seattle Art Museum and received grants from For Culture and the City of Seattle for her work. Her MFA is from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she also studied at Naropa University. And she has a website at xinyipai.com. Please welcome Xinyi.
How's this? Is this okay? All right. So I'm going to read tonight from a new collection of poems called Ozarks. The name of the book it comes from an ancient from a sort of older, antiquated way of referring to a region where I lived for a couple of years in Arkansas. So the book is called Ozarks, but is a reference to the Ozark Mountains. And the term itself means of or from Arkansas. So this book is a lot of place-based writing that grows out of a couple of years that I spent living in Texas and Arkansas, and some of the difficulty of living in a place that doesn't always feel hospitable, but is also at the same time about the kind of discoveries and beauty that we find even when sometimes we're on detours. Inner space. A guide aims her flashlight at the borehole drilled half a century before the build of I-35. Below ground, it's 20 degrees cooler than the blazing temps out there. The cavern where my Texan mate takes me to find relief from heat beneath a canopy of pencil-thin soda straw stalactites. The Permian floodwater maze that claimed the lives of Ice Age species, mammoth, armadillo, and saber-toothed cat, swamped in quicksand, a pyramid of bat guano piled high on the grotto floor, grows taller with time. Past the tailless cone of bone sink, I spot a crumbling tusk. Tongue my upper molar, claimed by dental caries, capped 1 month ago in gold. What relics, what remains hereafter. Main Street. Fresh from mailing notes to a college search committee, I turn over the last question asked, snap back to earth when sputum lands inches from my leather dress shoes. 3 teenage white boys park outside the post office, one in the passenger seat, watched as I walked out, synchronized throat clearing just then. Spitting towards isn't any crime. This isn't China with no government ban on discharging in public. The veil between town and gown torn down by the local welcome wagon. I climb inside the rental car where my partner notices enough to ask if everything's fine. I am careful when I try to describe spittle coming in my direction, thinking of our next-door neighbors back home, proud to wag the Southern Cross, displays we bristle against, and those which we resign ourselves to. So sports culture was a big part of the region where I was living, which is pretty alien to me. So this piece is called Black and White and Red All Over. Outside a sandwich shop, the boy with a scarlet-dyed mohawk crowds close to his siblings, razored scalps, a tribal connection I cannot look past their shaved heads, to see the red and white jerseys emblazoned with wrathful ridge-backed peccaries, an identity formed around shirts, not skin color. College sports plays games with my mind. The dogs behind every chain link fence yap at me as stray cats leave gifts of mice and hantavirus in the side yard, aware more than ever I am scared witless by wildlife. So, part of my experiences of living in this area was a lot about becoming more, I guess, flexible and adaptive. And so this poem is called Osaka and is about a Japanese restaurant that I used to go to in this little town of Conway, Arkansas, that was owned by a Korean couple. Osaka. After jotting down my order, the Korean-born cook shapes rice balls behind the stainless steel counter. My dinner companion recalls his days waiting tables at Sushi Tora in Boulder. How only male chefs prepared the premium cuts of fish laid over seasoned rice because the core temperature of a woman's palms aren't quite suited to sushi production. Post-Fukushima, I read in the New York Times of the shift in Japanese rice loyalty, the rise in imported grain, how we reorient our bodies and wants to what's at hand. Gleaners. Her partner regards her attempts at harvesting as one step closer to diving into dumpsters for second-hand sustenance. The apples my friend rescues from the city sidewalk where her neighbor's crop goes ungathered are lumpy and rough, not worth a cent by any market standard. Even in another land, fodder offered up to pigs and dogs, this offering she yields, to pare away the rind to such crisp sweetening beneath. So this next poem is called Six Persimmons, and it takes this title from a centuries-old Zen painting by a monk named Mu Chi. So it is an ink painting that is literally an image of six persimmons in various states of ripening. And art historians and Zen historians have looked at this painting and interpreted it as these persimmons representing the different stages of enlightenment, basically, of unripeness and decay. Six persimmons for my mother Noko. After ruining another season's harvest, overbaked in the kitchen oven, then rehydrated in her home sauna, Aunt Yuki calls upon her sister. Paper sacks stuffed full of orange fruit, twig and stalk still intact, knows that my mother sprouts seedlings from cast-off avocado stones, revives dead succulents, coaxes blooms out of orchids. A woman who has never spent a second of her being on the World Wide Web passes her days painting the diversity of marshland, woodland, and shoreline, building her own dehydrator fashioned from my father's work ladders, joined together by discarded swimming pool pole, perched high to discourage the neighbor's cats that invade the yard, scavenging for koi. Vitamin D, she says, as she harnesses the sun. In the backyard, the drying device mutates into painting. Slow-dripped sugar spilling out of one khaki fruit, empty space where my father untethers another persimmon he swallows whole. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from this book that have to deal with the theme of labor, which is on my mind a lot. I've not been working for the last few months. I've been on a maternity leave, and I'm getting ready to go back to work on Monday, so I've been thinking about work a lot. Working dog, do not pet. The Italian Maremma at the Arts Colony tends to its flock, nipping at the lambs. She grabs the baby sheep by their tails and pulls the more stubborn animals along. The famished herd looks on, while the young ones learn that when the call is sounded, the pack falls into quick formation. The cattle dog has no intimates. Her duty is to guard. To reach a hand beyond the electric safety fence might be to have it bitten off, or to tempt some greater peril to bring back before the canine intelligence a trace of her basic nature, that each living being is bred for more. Cull. 100 dogs put down during the slow season, a mass grave of huskies, malamute, and Utonagan stiffen under 4 feet of snow. 35 exotic animals freeze in Juarez at the Serengeti Zoo. Berto Hernan cites 14 parrots, 13 serpents, 5 iguanas, 2 crocs, and 1 capuchin monkey lost during power failure in Aldama. 21 Lechuga ponies collapse before a match, their bodies shot through with off-label injections. A dead rabbit arrives in the Chinese mail. An eel is inserted into the alimentary canal of an unconscious chef. Disemboweled alive, both man and moray expire. At New Year's, celebrants buy up birds determined to do good deeds, their wings already fractured, the fraternity. This poem is called Peabody Ducks, and it's about a group of ducks that work for this chain of hotels called the Peabody. So in Little Rock, and I think also maybe in Nashville, Tennessee, there's this hotel chain that their sort of big attraction is that they have this sort of fleet of ducks that they have trained to walk out of an elevator, parade down a red carpet, and hop into a fountain in the lobby. And so it attracts a lot of visitors to this hotel. And the hotel in Little Rock, actually around the time that I was leaving, actually sold to a larger chain that was going to renovate the hotel and make it into a new thing. So I've always kind of wondered what's going to happen to those ducks that had this job and were living in this glass cage on the roof, and they'd be like hand-fed, lettuce and cabbage, and I mean, they had this very sort of, I don't know, very imprisoned kind of life. It was very sad. So this piece is called Peabody Ducks. Live decoys with bloodlines reaching back to British callbirds lure onlookers to the luxury hotel. Housed in captivity, trained fledglings hold true to their avian traits. Nocturnal waterfowl upended in man-made fountains bathe, preen, loaf, and dabble, one orb always open against predators. Midday dozing, avs up in the clouds, take wing. So this next poem is called Towels That Could Hold the Heat, and I wrote it after spending some time in a small town called Hot Springs, Arkansas, where the National Park Service has a series of historic bathhouses from the turn of the century that were a tourist attraction for decades, but have now sort of fallen into decay and disrepair, but the Park Service now manages them so that tourists can sort of go and see the sort of former glory of these historic sites. So during that time, I got to do a little bit of research into these spaces and found that the people who were working in these bathhouses were often African Americans that were denied the privilege of actually using these services that they would provide. So this piece is called Towels That Could Hold the Heat. Sweat shunned by white men, blacks accounted for the better part of bathhouse rows valet staff. Banned from bathing during optimal hours, they scrubbed tubs, assisted invalids, currying mercury cures. Duties required them to work at temperatures between 95 to 100 degrees. 8-hour shifts. Claudine Adams recalls wearing white cotton uniforms, a numbered badge, no name tag, Hot Springs' motto, we bathe the world. This next piece is called Iron Chink and is inspired by an object in the collections of the Museum of History and Industry in Seattle. So the Iron Chink was this basically this fish processing machine that was built in the early 1900s to displace Chinese laborers. Iron Chink. When E.A. Smith failed to collect a return on his investment due to labor issues at the Chilkat Cannery, he took matters into his own hands. To build a machine better than any Chinese laborer, it had to butcher more piles of sockeye and salmon than a Chinaman could process by hand alone. In a 10-hour shift, more than 2,000 fish, still not fast enough to turn a profit, blood up to their waists, wading through carpets 10 feet long, a 40-foot spread. The slitters cut off heads and fins, slit open the belly. Slimers gutted, cleaning the cavity, removing the scales, so choppers could slice the fish into steaks, the lengths of cans, fillers, wipers, and cappers finished off. By a machine, its inventor coined the Iron Chink, the perfect fish-cleaning machine developed to stamp out the need for so many hired hands, butchers, migrant workers, living hand to mouth. So one of the sort of persistent themes in my work in general and in this book is that I'm very interested in the sort of intersections between the visual arts and poetry. And so I'm going to read you a couple of poems from this book that deal with the visual arts. And this first series of poems that I'll read to you is about the work of a light and space installation artist named James Turrell. For any of you who maybe travel to Seattle once in a while and have been to the Henry Art Gallery, there's an installation of James Turrell's there, a sky space or a Ganzfeld. So what these sky spaces are basically in most cases is that the artist has created a room or an environment that has an aperture or hole in the ceiling where a viewer can sit in this space and look up into the sky as the patterns of the clouds change and different sort of phenomena drift in and out. And so he's quite famous for making these sky spaces that are installed all over the United States and even in other countries. And some of these spaces are actually outdoor spaces and sort of carefully crafted environments that may also utilize installed lights versus natural light. So this series of poems is about my visitation of a number of these sites. In some cases, the sky spaces, as ridiculous as it sounds, have been broken down or closed. And so I have a couple of poems about the disappointment of, driving 200 miles and not seeing what you went to go for. Tending, blue. Contemplating urban building creep, two art fanatics launch a scarlet-red sphere skywards at the exact location of the future museum tower, an empty concrete lot, to test a theory of infringement upon an artist's field of vision. 3 years later, the glass skin of the neighboring luxury condo project scorches the natural lawn with too much reflected light, the frame's edges scaffolding construction hoists. Light rain. Inside the sky viewing chamber, galaxy black granite flecked flooring reverses a cutout of azure, light in late winter, earth echoing nightfall, stone mirror map of infinite constellation. And that's a poem that was inspired by the Henry space. Star Shrine. Altar, altar, alma, mater, matter, mutter, moonward. Murmur, muster, muscle, muse, mute. Courtyard piece. Where light chimes at the strike of each hour, where sharpness shifts into stillness, where crescent moon burns into view, where night-blown cactus breaks into bloom, where an overheated hound enters the stream of infinity pool, where atoms of dissolving ice cascade across a warm windshield, where visitors top out, void, and refill foramen under shelter of steel, where intervals of space and light draw sudden apertures of awning. Sundown. Closed for repairs and maintenance, the stone bunker broken down. Metal grate blocking approach, out of order, overhead, blue yonder, still visible through human oculus shaped from stainless steel. I go through the roof upon matter brought to light, blind passage, the museum's coveted corner of contemplation, shuttered till further notice. And I think I have time for maybe just two poems. So I'll quickly read to you a piece called Touch Tour. It's about kind of my interest in objects and museums and I guess my attraction to the stories that objects can tell us sometimes or what they may reflect to us about our own interests and engagements. Touch Tour. It's March 2nd, 2012, and throughout the loop, Rahm Emanuel City sings with Celtic fiddle waltzes. Piped in music synchronized to jig with emerald and white, light displays, dotting State Street, a town gone verdant, in celebration of St. Pat's, fires up light-emitting diodes to create low-impact points of interest, though the waters of the Chicago River still run green with vegetable tint. I eschew the bean and public art in Millennium Park in favor of the old masters, Arp and Aconchi. Though secretly it's the city's new Renzo piano that stuns me to tears, remembering the modern art curator who once declared, I am an orphan, removed as any number of articles strung together in a given assortment, abstracting the Art Institute's Morse Gallery, a group of relics cobbled together to instruct the visually impaired, stripped of timepiece and ornament, to lift the ban and see through one's touch. And I think I have time for maybe one more poem. Is it about, yeah, okay. So this is a poem about a national park in Texas and about New Year's. Enchanted Rock. Scattered across pink batholith monadnock, weather pits sprout Texas bluestem. Live oak, miniature soil islands, independent ecologies, all of their own. 425 feet above ground, opening out over the Llano uplift. We scale the giant boulder on New Year's Day to get to highest ground, 6 months since our last move and still strangers to Texas hill country. I inspect a water-filled depression, remembering the tide pools of Mora Beach, as you identify 1-inch invertebrates swimming upside down beneath the surface. The fabled fairy shrimp, whose eggs survive even in drought to be revived in salt water, or when rain returns to granite shelter. Evidence of animal existence on this barren rock, adapting to a new habitat over millennia. We descend the dome to feast with friends, a supper of black-eyed peas. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who have never been to the Sky Space, I highly recommend it. Anyone been there? Okay, I do recommend it. There's something spiritual or transcendent about the space there, if you can visit the Henry. And I don't know where the nearest other Sky Space is, but I'm sure it's worth visiting too. I've heard of them in Australia and other places around the world. Yeah, yeah. There are lots of good pictures online. Thank you. Our next reader is Jerry McFarland. He's a recent graduate with an MFA in creative writing from the Rainier Writers Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma. And he is a co-editor of Floating Bridge Press, which is one of our local poetry treasures. And he also teaches writing at the University of Phoenix. His work has appeared in Talking River, Ziziva, Sanskrit, Crab Creek Review, Crucible, Bayou, Limestone, and other publications. He was awarded the 2005 Sam Reagan Prize and was a finalist in the 2003 WinningWriters.com War Poetry Contest. Please welcome Jerry McFarland.
Thank you for that warm introduction. I have two groups of poems this evening that I'm going to read from. One is from a manuscript called The Making, which is about family, work, relationships, etc. And the second one is entitled Gunner. It's about my experiences as a Navy person during the Vietnam War. The Making, for Tim. Closed on a hammer, his hands are like hills, swollen places on the earth. Palms open become rough plains, each line a minute streambed circling discolored calluses. At evening, seated under kitchen light, elbows on his knees, palms open as a stubble field, he picks at scabs, fingers newly blistered faults, in a ritual of reparation to the god of the unfinished. Tomorrow his hands will make a house. Mute instruments will build from air the fact of wood, join opposing forests. There must be a new word for such making. In morning light, on the hill, pine studs will frame the house of the new word. The molten sun will light the house's bones. The hands will start things off. Blocks will hold promise, and the smells of pine, sawdust, earth, and rain will be new. This is from a time in my wife and I's life in our house when we had a very small kitchen, which has subsequently been expanded greatly. It was also about something else. Rejected by a little magazine, the poet repairs the faucet. In the window of our cramped yellow kitchen, light fractures into cherry branches. Blossoms fell last month, pink edits on the fresh green page. Deep in the faucet, the gasket is worn. Water sputters in a silver throat, and the whole thing bangs and quakes. Light steps in the leaves of the cherry, fixes me to the floor, wrench in one hand, lead neck of the battered fixture in the other. Damp, dark stuff sent up unfiltered into every kitchen, drips black onto the floor, pools on linoleum, a tiny black lake of corroded iron. Once I ran a plumber snake down under the kitchen sink, down the larynx of the house, into the bowels until it gurgled, popped, and spit back loose crap from the deep. But this is a simple repair, just a humble little pink washer. There. One branch in the window frame jerks like an elbow, deleting thoughts, ending sentences. White fists of light cross the room, fly back into the cherry tree, apart from the plumbed world, to mingle with leaves, shake loose the last of the soft pink thumbprints. Skipping Stones, San Fernando Valley, 1964. I realize I'm dating myself when I say that, but so be it. Skipping Stones. I remember the sway of her forearm, gentle as she stepped small by my side up the hill to the dam at the end of the steep boulevard, the man-made lake. Summers then were loose, sunny, long as the warm sidewalk uphill from her yellow house. We didn't know the dam would burst when the fingers of the old fault worked loose the bound water onto the evacuated neighborhood. We were 13. We didn't know she would be thrown from a horse in Denver, restrained in the brilliant room while they set the bone and scrubbed the wounds. We knew the words to Unchained Melody and all the names of the Beach Boys. We were the small flesh of the world. We didn't know the imminence of her father's death. I didn't know what it meant when my forearm brushed against hers. The stone has to look like this, I told her. She showed a girl's disinterest, wandered mute down the shore, touching the hair she had spent an hour setting. I demonstrated how to fit the stone in the knuckle, bend close to the water, swing the arm parallel the earth. I threw my heart out the end of my fingers. When I was a child, my father had a surgery on his forehead, and it was cancerous growth there. And it left quite a mark, a rectangular indentation in his forehead, which is always very noticeable. And the doctor said that flesh would grow back, but it never did. My father's scar. Doctors said the flesh would grow back, but it never did. As children, my brother and I were not to speak of it. I imagined Geronimo had scalped the white man in his sleep. When I was 11, I lifted my shirt on the schoolyard to show the scar from my appendectomy. I had something missing too, another secret that wasn't. Endless sunlight fell on the yellow house among the shadows of orange groves. Rows of silver Quonset huts of migrant workers shimmered. I learned a word, developer. Huge machines ripped up the groves and left the pulpy trunks like green soldiers parallel the ground, the dark roots like hands crusted with the soil of their graves that reached toward us as we ran by, rotting oranges in our fists for the long food fight summer. A kid I knew, Steve, was killed when he flew on a bike out from between parked cars. The word Steve became his sister's face, what she said afterward. Then the trees were gone, and the huge dust-flying field grew whole streets that lined themselves with two-story houses. My brother joined the Army. I drove a red Chevy convertible to the beach on school days, ate frozen bananas, my toes in a friendly tide, while dutiful students attended primly in their seats and scribbled notes. I acted on my own desire. My parents watched Vietnam and Gunsmoke on television. I was the last kid in the house, the not my brother. I thought of myself as the wind, where my car went. But deep in the silence, I knew the not my brother was a scar, torn from the earth like the long dead groves, and a car the color of blood, a red slash on the road. few years ago, my wife and I took a trip to Paris, and we saw the famous graveyard, Père Lachaise, centuries old. There was a tree that had glommed on, its root had glommed onto a crypt and lifted it up out of the ground. Anyway, the oak and the grave, Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris, France. 200 years it took the oak to find the grave after its roots knuckled down to it in the yard. Another 100 years, a knotty elbow at the edge embraced it, and the oak stretched its bony arms and leafy hands over a sea of stones, and took another century to lift, as if in praise, the crypt from the dirt, skew the lid, spill the fine white dust from crevices carved by hand to signify this final matter, claim it, expose the faded etch of an ancient name. This is for a couple of friends of mine who have since moved on. Camino Island by car for Rick and Linda. When we drove the long hills, adrift in the eye of a storm of color, and the land rose and fell green, how did we keep our senses, keep locked our stumbling features, not fall from the open sedan, foolish to the sweet earth, drunk with beauty? 2 red lines on the map meant, with faith, we would find our place, the intersecting fence posts, the broad porch on the hill. And the dappled yard by the arbor stooped over a new beach. They looked up, shouted, each waved one free arm. Okay, the rest of it is from the Gunner manuscript. This is when I was first in the Navy and the first time I saw Japan. Gunner falls in love. Among the crew, lined up in whites, standing and talking at parade rest on the forecastle of the ship, I saw the island of Honshu, starboard, the green hills sculpted into steps, the green uncommonly green, bright and deep as the sun on the swells. Asahi was sweet, the rice salty, the girls, smelling of powder, spoke a tide of consonants. Her breath was warm and soft on my cheek. So this was love in the dark, like hiding. Everything was closed. Everyone was gone, but the girls in green silk leaning in doorways down the narrow alleys lighted with angled neon. I drifted, drunk, without order, foreign, unable to speak my love in the strange, dark town. They sang to me like crickets. Buy me drink, buy me drink. When I was in the Navy, we had spent a lot of time in the Philippines, in a town that was a sailor town. It had one road through the middle, which was just mud, and there were jeepneys racing up and down the street, and they apparently didn't have brakes or lights or anything. They just had horns and gas pedals. And that's how they operated. And they would swing, dodge each other on both sides of the street going opposite directions. It's pretty crazy. But there's other things involved. Monsoon for Joyce. I want to tell you about the monsoon, the plank bridge from the gate of Subic Bay Naval Station to Olongapo, the Yellow River children dived for coins in, how the monsoon made Olongapo a lake, men into dark silhouettes, slow as divers on a dirt town's nameless single road. The monsoon drenched this white-clad sailor, American dollars hidden in damp shoes, pink and blue fringed canopies of jeepneys lurched and splashed a puddled road past monkey meat on fire drum spits. The fountain ringed by stone faces, chipped in every election's gunfire, baby ducks thrown to alligators for a peso. In the monsoon's spontaneous embrace, my uniform translucent in the warm flood, with the brown bottle of San Miguel I drank outside in the mud, I thought of you in that clean and sunny yard, your face like a pale blossom. The monsoon baptized Olongapo, granted extravagant forgiveness, made the road dark slop, tin rooftops rattle. That was my last visit, to Olongapo City. Long before Mount Pinatubo plumed over Mindanao, Luzon, and thick gray dust grew to windblown shapes of pickup trucks on the abandoned base, and Olongapo strangled in soft, hot feathers. I've forgotten what you look like. Never saw the Philippines beyond Olongapo. Never saw the rain tree forest, the swing of light in another country. But Olongapo, Olongapo, I keep saying your name. Olongapo, once full of sticks and gunfire, deepened in a new volcanic skin, jeepney's axles wound with the tendrils of the koa. I enter your dark street with a shovel and an axe. Gunner apologizes for not shooting. Somewhere over the hot water lay the enemy. Don't know what they're going to do, Captain says. Our faces parallel at battle stations. Sure, we're nuclear, but they're crazy. Keep your butt up, boy. The rivet of my helmet dug into my scalp. There's nothing anywhere but ocean. The enemy is always invisible, Captain says, until it's time to shoot. Brace yourself like a tripod. My flak jacket hung on me. The flacking started 8 inches below my shoulder, plenty of room for a small rocket or a series of shells and a neat parabola to find me and my bowl of helmet. The best defense is a good offense, Captain says. Shoot first. 2 facts, Captain says, in military life. Follow any lawful order, and all orders are lawful. Watch the endless horizon endlessly. Breathe. Bend your knees, grip the gun as if you would fall without it. The knuckle loose at the trigger. Wait for the enemy. Hold your position for 25 years. When we weren't overseas, we were in San Diego. The ship was based in San Diego, California. And there was quite a sailor town, or a sailor district in San Diego that served our lascivious needs. Gunner's go-go girl dream. She turns on the bar top, face lifted to strobe-lit heaven, eyes closed, the little hills of her ankles fluid as the surf, the mounds of her hips, twin atolls that narrow to the peninsula of her bare waist under spare dim moons. She is a human island in a long, dark world of spilled beer and glitter. Her moon face up in lights, tropical as sand. Does she, her face like a moon over the ocean, desire? My heart is at sea. My rudder shifts port to starboard, rises and falls in the body. The stars of her own island planet blink. She dances on the bar top, long as a dock, a harbor break in the darkness, and we, her supplicants, like little gigs at the toes of her pointed shoes, bob in her wind. The door to the bar opens onto Broadway, San Diego. Horns crash, engines throttle, and light from headlamps and streetlights reveal the bouncer, bored, sober, slumped on his stool, checking IDs with a flashlight. I could leave, unmoor from this dock. But the beer is cold, and all there is on the street are the hawks selling gilt-edged Bibles. Here the light softens on her skin. Her hips drift, and the rhythmic tide and her long, dark, curled hair falls on the swells of her breasts and gleams like the moon and stars on the surface of a black sea on a clear night. She dances in front of me, looks down at me from the glory of her painted face, into my adoration, and dawns into a smile meant for me alone. And I dream my hands on the wheels of a red Stingray top down, bound for Tijuana, her fingers in my hair, tires rolling like the ocean. One of the things I did when I was in the Navy was drink a lot. So that was not unusual. So this is a story of a biker friend of mine who was also in the Navy, and me when we took a rather eventful drive. Gunner and Chuck ride. After drinking all day, a movie drive-in was Dullsville, man, so we blew the joint in my Volkswagen, swigged from the buds in the open case. Chuck said, "Let's get to Harley. Put the wind in our hair." "Far out, man," I said. "Just the thing." And I swung the bug down Strange Street and stepped on it. I didn't see the thick white-painted posts at the end of the road. Drove right between them. Swept like an albatross down the steep wooded gut, blacked out, and stopped at the trunk of a California oak tree. When I came to, blood ran down Chuck's sleeping face. I touched the handle, and the door thumped the dirt, and I fell out, face up in the cool, soft soil. And I dreamed I was at sea, calm and slow in the dark under stars, and the swells whispered like angels. I heard Chuck's voice. Glass still breaking. One front tire wobbled cattywampus. The black windshield gasket dangled from a branch like a giant rubber band. Then Chuck stood over me like a bloody vision of mercy under heaven's dark trees, his face blood red and his lips moving. I crawled on hands and knees toward the white angels whispering hymns from the top of the hill until they grew silent and still, but I could see them above me in white robes, not singing, and looking down at me, crawling up toward them. But when I reached them, they had turned to wood, flakes of white paint broken loose and falling. I could still hear them, their many voices, thick and heavy, louder and louder. Lights flashed. My hands disappeared, and the angels, now wearing black with guns on their hips, put their hands on my head and blessed me into the open seat of the black and white car. Chuck stood by a huge red truck. An angel in white anointed his forehead. Lights filled the forest, brilliant and splashing. My throat burned, my head throbbed, my stomach felt hard and sharp, and I thought I was going to be sick, but only words came out, swollen and thick. "It's all right, man," I told him. "You guys are doing your job. I'm a drunk, and we're all brothers." I sat all night on a concrete floor, gambled with cigarettes. Released at dawn on my own recognizance, a nameless boat, I floated to the shore of the first open bar. How am I doing for time? Okay. Gunner tells what happened. From below, where the tanks of heat boiled, he surfaced, charred boots first. Drenched with his last sweat, cheeks and forehead blistered in perfect circumferences, islands of pink skin strafed by fire. Tied in a metal stretcher, still dressed, he stared off as if in thought, about to ask the time or tell us how he smelled his death and let go. Bearing their damp shipmate forward, they navigate this new continent on the dark deck of the disabled ship, adrift and blind in the Gulf of Tonkin, running lights, the only stars. How awkwardly they set the body down. Their hands fail them. They return for the next body, 3 more yet, failing silently as young men do. Okay, here's one more Gunner poem. I think it's about survival guilt. Because in the fire there was 4 guys were killed, and that was just one of them that we just pulled out. And this was in part of the aftermath. Gunner tries to die. The sea rolls off the end of the world. Somewhere in the sky is Nam. In the invisible jungle, the unknown buddy wades in the infected muck, twigs in his hat, face painted green and black, elbows cradle the AK-47, swing at night in the thick water and lily pads. I believe my heart is shot, hung on a wire from my neck, purple as rage or a prize. I die then on the fantail, clutch my shirt from the unknown buddy, grimacing and sinking in the swamp without me. The USS King steams out of the Tonkin Gulf, out of the smoky towers and muddy caverns by an itinerary, a tidy printed protocol clean as the Admiral's shoes. Orders to abandon the unknown buddy, lost anyway, sleep-breathing slime into his lungs, sinking and dying. I look back from the rolling fantail over the wake of the USS King, imperial, blind, and speechless. One more. Gunner gets his sea legs. While I was seasick my first months at sea, the bosun mate said, "It's all in your head, boy." So I learned to right myself at sea. When the starboard beam of the USS King slipped down, swollen as a pot-bellied sailor, my dungarees flagging in the groaning gusts, I remained upright, starboard aft in the hard turn, work boots, black wedges flat on the non-skid, while the gray planet shifts rudder, the wind veered, the whole splashing vessel sloped into the long turn. I leaned into the curve of the earth and put my face into the wind. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. A couple of quick announcements. One is that the Redmond Association of Spoken Word will be having its monthly reading on December 27, and there's no featured poet that night, and instead each open mic reader has 10 minutes to read. So it's a good time if you have some fiction to share, or a longer piece of poetry or sets of poetry. So that's at the Old Redmond Schoolhouse Community Center at 7 p.m. on Friday, December 27. And next month, the regular Soul Food Poetry Night will be on January 23rd. So tonight is 1 week earlier than usual. We will be returning to the third Thursday. Pardon me, the third Thursday in January is the 16th, not the 23rd. So January 16. And another announcement is as part of my Redmond Poet Laureate activities, if you don't have one of these little flyers or a bookmark, please ask me for one. In January will be the second of the Wanted Dead or Alive readings featuring dead poets. And we had E. Cummings on October 30th. Coming up on January 29, which is a Wednesday, the feature will be Rumi. And in April and July will be Emily Dickinson and Pablo Neruda. So please come to those and pick up one of these brochures if you'd like to, or a handy bookmark. Thanks again to Shinyi Pai and Jerry McFarland. Let's take a short break, get something to eat or drink, and Shinyi has some her copies of Ozarks available. And if you'd also like to sign up for the open mic, please do that. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Okay, we're having a mellow evening, but I think it's time to get started again. We have a short open mic. We'll take just a few minutes for that. Our question of the month this month is, what is your favorite Star Wars character? And the first person on our sign-up list likes Princess Leia, and that is... Yes. Peggy Barnett.
Oh, okay. Boy, it is bright up here. I know, do. Well, it was interesting that Jerry read a poem about Père Lachaise, because I have a poem about Père Lachaise Cemetery, too, that I wanted to read. And, well, this one is called Remembrance of Things Proust. Proust is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery. And there are several translations of Proust's work that have been newly reissued, but I happen to like the original one by Moncrieff. And I just recently found out where he got the title of Remembrance of Things Past for his book. So this is called Remembrance of Things Proust. And there's a little epigraph in the front here. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought, I summon up remembrance of things past. And that's sonnet number 30 by William Shakespeare. Man Ray's photograph of the corpse is a shocking truth. Proust is dead. The air is clean and bright today as I walk along the Appian Way of Paris, down the winding roads of Père Lachaise Cemetery. My feet slide off the rounded edges of pale orange cobblestones, twisting my ankles back and forth until my knees hurt. Mottled, overlapping tombs tumble into weeds in the dark, damp soil. Rotting wooden doors with curlicute cast iron gates hang crooked on one rusty hinge in the entry of small gargoyled mausoleums, roofs pointing askew, just large enough for two now empty granite shelves, one above the other. Light streams through red and blue glass remnants stuck in cracked lead and reaches into a moldy, mossy corner smelling of last year's autumn leaves. My pilgrimage to Proust's tomb began many years ago in college with a calligraphy assignment in Paul Standard's class. Pick a novel, then write some pages from it in your own original script. Leading me, for reasons long forgotten, to remembrance of things past, out of which I began to copy endless sentences at an age when I was vulnerable to those sad, bittersweet emotions, but better able to tolerate them then, and began a long worldly romance with a dead lover. The stillness of his granite tomb, a rectangular black star, singular in its starkness. His name in perfect gold Trajan lettering is an echo of the stillness that was his bedroom, with its pale yellow cork-lined walls, now with no wispy rustle of his blue silk blanket, no scratching of his bamboo quill pen, no silver-chained glasses perching on his nose, no tap of the wooden gold-circled walking stick leaning on the tan and green patterned armchair, its tarnished gold fringes draped on the worn flowered carpet. Closed, heavy-lidded eyes surrounded by dark circles, underscored by a beaked nose, made more prominent by the sunken cheeks of death. Black hair and beard contrasting with the white sheet tucked under his chin. A white pillow crushed by the weight of the small, exhausted head. In his black stone tomb, Proust rests quietly with his blue silk bedsheet wrapped around him, a transparent shroud gently covering his dark dust. Suddenly, a candle flames to light over his face. Hot wax drips onto his forehead. Startled, he awakes, turns round heavy-lidded black eyes to mine, willing me not to forget. I catch a handful of words blowing around the stones to throw them into the open-ended hourglass of time, a place where lost grains of memories endlessly fall. Is that it? Will I use up my time or? Oh. A short one. Oh, well, for me that's not easy. All right. Well, you want a funny one? I have a funny one here. To make people like to laugh, so I do this. It's called Caesar's Underpants. Oh, this is entirely serious, yes. Oh, who was it? Paul Nelson couldn't hear me when I was reading this once before, and he said, Caesar Underpants? You know. No, it's Caesar's Underpants. Okay. Tall and thin, Miss Urban, our 5th grade teacher at PS 89, looks like olive oil. Her hair bun is huge, a sleek black cat sitting on her thin neck. Miss Urban is unwillingly taking our class to the Theater in the Round production of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. 30 children get on the subway and immediately fall down as the train starts. Wanting to lose us in Manhattan, but not being allowed to, she herds us into an old stone church theater. We sit in the first row, girls on the right side, boys on the left. I'm sitting with Kathy and Justine. It's a play about murderous old adult men droning on with too many old adult men being paid to perform the bard for 10-year-olds. I can't understand what they're mumbling as the hot stage lights sparkle as they spit. Then Caesar declares, "Let me have men about me that are fat." And Mark Antony, Cassius, and Brutus sit down on stone benches. We 3 girls sit up. Their togas, really too short to sit in, are above their knees now. We are below the stage, our eyes level with its floor. We can see their underpants. Mark Antony's are white cotton and look like a sack of potatoes. Cassius wears black that disappears in black curly hair, lots of curly hair down to his knees. Brutus has blue boxer shorts with yellow stripes. We stare, not hearing a word spoken. What kind of underpants does Caesar wear? We wait anxiously for him to sit down. But Caesar doesn't sit down. He's Caesar. Oh my God, we whisper. What if he doesn't wear underpants? We stare in delicious fear, and suddenly we hear, "Hence wilt thou lift up Olympus? Then et tu, Brute, then fall, Caesar." Caesar crashes to the ground, covered in blood, his toga all messed up and above his knees. Back in school, Kathy and Justine and me fail the test. But Miss Urban had asked the wrong question. If she had asked it, we would have told her. Caesar's underwear is blood red.
You're scarred for life by those toga viewings. Our next reader is Tanya McDonald, and her favorite Star Wars character is indeed Chewbacca.
Ooh, those are bright lights. Everyone should have to come up here and blink blindingly into the brights. Yes. Alrighty, some of you have probably heard a few of these haiku before. I've been working on my novel, so I haven't been writing poetry lately. But anyway, we have some holiday, winterish type haiku for you tonight. Cold night. Muffin tins nesting in the cupboard. Frozen fog. The furniture store still going out of business. Have you ever seen those signs where it seems like the store is going out of business for about 6 months and they're still going out of business? All right. The next one, Divinity is a kind of candy my grandmother used to make at Christmas time. And I thought about making some last week when it was so dry, but I never got around to doing it. Apparently that's the best time to make it with low humidity, and we don't have low humidity here a lot. Anyway. Dusty cookbook. I find her recipe for divinity. Fresh gingerbread. I reread my sister's coming out letter. And one last one. Newlyweds. We leave the mistletoe up a little longer. Thank you.
And I was expecting you to read those in a Chewbacca voice. For my answer to this question, it's sort of random since Voldemort doesn't work. I wrote Jabba the Hutt. This poem is called Fighting the Rain. It is time to write a new story, one with pom-poms and razor blades, eternal life and wishes that cannot come true. It is time to write about pain, about carpet stains, starfish and pilgrims of yeast and carbon, conjugations and filigrees. It is time to come clean on lies of living, on the spice of dying, time to grow spines and feast on the spoils of 9 to 5. It is time to find rhymes for mystery, for birth and death, the history of gods, of each one true church. It is time to dare to eat that orange, to plunge the knife and reap those notes of harmony. It is time, is it not, to foil the villains, wash the dishes, roll the dice, scoop the brains from the cannon's cadaver, never to waver despite the rain that turns to snow and back again. Time to know the life of snails, the tolling of bells and mercy's weather. Time to fold origami nightmares into scant daydreams, mold into plowshares, fold sheets of rain into swords of delight. That endless rain, fight enemas of thought with well-wrought capers, light salads on fire, take the money and gun for something true, something few and far. Time to hone the hope that slopes those cells within the skulls of certain poets. It is time to write a new story, time to write anew, time to write, time. It is time, it is time, it is time. And this is called If I'm Lucky. I am writing this poem in the hope that someone will need it enough that it will save their life. This poem will give the reader, perhaps you, permission that isn't even needed to be happy or sad or gay or straight, to be Jewish or Hindu or atheist. It will possibly smell a bit when it mentions cadavers or lavender, but someone somewhere will breathe it in and find themselves in its patina, find themselves in words not said. And then, if I am lucky, they will go out the door less shy, less willing to die. Thank you. So again, thank you to our featured readers, Shunyi and Jerry, and thank you for making the trek out here. We have had a smaller turnout, but I've enjoyed the intimacy and sharing, and hope you can come back again next month. And before you leave, if you feel like buying something more to drink or eat, please do. And once again, let's thank Soul Food for hosting us. Thank you. Good night.
você